So Jensen made an announcement today about the progress on the database release of Logseq, and I think it's very nice to see them giving an official statement for me as well, because I can link towards that one when there's any confusion. And I thought it might be interesting to make a short video where I go through this post and basically add some thoughts and comments to everything that was said and maybe clear it up for some people or some people that aren't on the Discuss forum. Got the post open here. I'm gonna go see if I can zoom that in a bit. So when we have the site open, it immediately says it's been a while since we've seen Tienson. Last post was 6 months ago, and that's because he isn't usually on the forums. He sometimes gets into conversations, but usually he's just busy with work. In that regard, I can relate. I also have trouble keeping all the social media synced, and I'd much rather be building videos like these. So a quick introduction, questions about the coming database versions, like why we're developing it, what takes so long, and a quick apology because they're spending a lot of time before communicating. I think that is one of the things that we know the Logseq team for. It's not a bad thing. I think it's mostly because they started out as developers and then suddenly you have to do all this community support and try to communicate with people, and it always comes back with a lot of questions because we're definitely outnumbering them. That's how this works. So glad that at least they're taking that step, and I think we should encourage that. Now, I want to go to the frequently asked questions first, because I've noticed in the Twitter feed or X feed that a lot of people were confused about this, and that is Markdown support will be deprecated. No, it will not be deprecated. Continue both file-based and database graphs with a long-term goal of achieving seamless two-way sync between the database and Markdown files. This will allow you to leverage the benefits of the database version while still being able to use other tools. So what does that mean concretely for people? From what I've read and seen, that means that initially you'll be able to make a new graph based on the database backend that will have the new features that they build in. But if you are using the Markdown files extensively, then you can say no, I want to stay on Markdown for a while until the whole thing gets worked up. But at some point they'll need to drop support for both. I think it's not valuable to do both at the same time. It doesn't mean that you'll lose that, but that they need to write some solution for it, meaning that the database will become what's called the main place where all the changes are happening, and the Markdown files will get a two-way sync that will be slower. I think that is an improvement because Markdown is a backend. I'm currently writing a video about it as well, why I think Markdown as a backend isn't the best solution. It's not a database. It's not something that you can really easily make frequent changes in, and by slowing that down just a little bit, what is slow to a computer once a minute is still fast enough for us humans, and they could do it faster than that. But by making it a slower process and having a place that they know what is what and easier to change, they can get a lot of improvements in. So I don't think this is necessarily bad. I am glad that they're enforcing this because it's really important, at least to me and a lot of other people, that there's still a readable text backend. This is one of the reasons why I use Logseq, and I don't like using cloud user stories like Tana, even Notion, though I still use Notion a lot, because I can't really access the data. I have to make a backup and export it into text. Having this constantly running in the background means that even if at some point, I don't know, Logseq disappears of the earth, which would be really hard since I'll have local copies from the last 5 versions in my download folder, I'll still be able to access those files, which is good. First concern out of the way, there will be a database version. Let's go for this. The context. Everybody loves plain text files, and with tools like Git and Obsidian, we can use them in conjunction with Seq. However, there are some limitations, and those limitations are: building real-time collaboration on top of Markdown files is extremely challenging. A couple of examples: creating a new block requires rewriting the entire Markdown file. Now, this is true, of course, when you're writing computer files. There is a limitation with text files where you have to rewrite them all over again. So you might be wondering, yeah, but that's not different from, example, a database file, right? And that's not totally true, because what a database file does is that it takes extra space. So there's space in between. You can imagine making a Markdown file which has a lot of empty space in the middle, except of course in Markdown it's not enters, it's real empty space. You would put a placeholder. Let's say you put I don't know, a smiley face in there. You'll have 20,000 smiley faces between every line. That's something that database can do. They can keep that space, or they can just add towards the end and then reference internally to the other things. That's not something you do with text files. Text files, you have to take it to memory, see what changes to make, and write back. And that becomes a huge problem as soon as you start using that to talk to multiple people at the same time. So yes, this is definitely a valid one. Then you got renaming a page updates all files that reference it. That's another one that's tricky and that we've all seen. If you want to rename a page, then you have to go through your whole graph, find every reference towards that page, every block reference at least, brackets, and change it. And if you make a mistake somewhere there, or something is written different than you were expecting, it makes it very brittle. You don't have that in a database, because in a database you would never refer towards name, you would refer to the ID, and then when you're rendering the page in the app, you would look up the ID, find the name, and then put that that in there. That is much more robust. That means that you can change the name of the will, and everywhere it's referenced, because every other place uses an ID that doesn't change. It means it makes it stable, makes it faster. So these are really valid concerns. Then the structured data is supported, is limited compared to a database, lacking features like persistent IDs, timestamps, and more. You could argue that those things are there, but they would clutter up your markdown file considerably. If every line would have an ID, a timestamp, it wouldn't make it readable, and it would kind of take away from what markdown files are. I mean, if I would open my markdown files and it would be filled with IDs to other pages, so not names, but an ID, like a number, I wouldn't be able to read it anymore. I would have to go find that number, open that page, look at the title. Adding timestamps, would be possible, and I would be able to filter those out, because you would just find, replace, and remove all the lines that have a timestamp, but it still would be really messy. So those kind of things is what he's referring to here. Having like readable markdown and putting all this data in is a hard sell. Then we get to templates and properties make it easy to add new books, papers, and more, but they're difficult to maintain and collaborate on. So trying to understand what he means with this one, because technically I could do that with Markdown. I already have like templates and properties. I think he's mostly talking here about the fact that in a database version, you could put these things in a central location. I see that when I test the database version where things are stored centrally. That really helps with making things consistent. This is one of the main reasons I'm looking forward towards this change, because I am very chaotic by nature. I use systems to keep things in sync, and having my system help me with it instead of my mind trying to memorize it will help tremendously. I don't really think this is 100% true. You could put all these templates, properties, this data like in an EDN file next to your markdown files, and I don't think people would complain a lot about that. But yeah, it would still be clunky, and you would still have like two different backends. So less fair, but still, like, thinking about it, one thing that is nice, and that's something we see in the database version, is that by having this and using IDs, it's like really easy to filter out data even in large graphs. So for example, what is a project? What is a book? What is a paper? And because you have the data structure, you don't have to worry about how to write it down. You might be able to make some defaults, which I think would be a really good use case for Logseq, to have some basic setup for things that you don't have to write yourself, helping people that are new to Logseq get started faster. Now let's see. Our vision is to create a better environment for learning and collaboration. The current app falls short on our goals, with limitations including no web support. Yeah, there is demo.logseq.com, but it works very much locally. I would assume that when they are talking web support, they're also talking about having that database somewhere. That's one of the biggest benefits that you'll have with a database, is that you'll be able to talk with that database and don't have to read a lot of files. And so you might be able to make like a web version that actually talks to a backend database, but I'm not sure if they're referring to it in that regards. Still, like having better web support, so making it easy for people to access. I know a lot of people are working on school computers where they're not allowed to install Logseq, or they're working on company computers where they're not allowed to install any software. And having like that web support as a backend would really help those people. So I think that's a nice goal, but I don't know how this will pan out. Then we have the data loss when using Logseq sync with multiple clients. Well, I'm very aware of this one. I sync with a lot of devices. It's been less after I got rid of the studio, but I still have my desktop, my laptop, tablet, and phone, which is 4 devices. And I don't think 4 devices even that unreasonable, because, you know, people have at least 2, like their phone and their laptop. But if you have like a gaming PC like I have, or like a desktop and a laptop, or you have like a work laptop and a PC at home for your own stuff, you'll quickly hit like 3 devices. A lot of people still have a tablet, so then you already hit 4. And there you already see like this problem. Even though I can't use all the devices at the same time, because they are not syncing while I'm not using them, they have to sync when they get back. Then things sometimes get out of whack. And as soon as I start using them at the same time, this becomes a problem. Now, why is that a problem? And that's very often because Logseq does not know what was changed when and how to fit those things together. I talked about that in my Git video where I say how Git merges, and it still works, but it's not perfect. You can avoid that data loss with a database, because there you don't throw things away. You just add changes into the database, and then if something is missing, you can easily restore that by saying like, okay, we'll just do a step back in history. Logseq does that with sync, Logseq does that with Git, but compared to being able to know what has changed and then giving like a good suggestion, that would be a huge benefit. And then we see poor performance with large graphs. I think that's mostly on the backend side, because Logseq does the sync to create the index, meaning that on large graphs, that index was the main issue. You could make like a better setup, but at the end, when you're working with stuff, you're not changing 15 files at the same time. That poor performance mostly happens because you're loading data into it and then don't have a good way to sync it. I think part of this comes from not having all these properties and ideas, and meaning that for things like pages, you have to like make names, maybe give them an idea and then load them. But we all know that the pain of of re-indexing. So hopefully that goes away. Unreliable undo functionality. Yeah, locally it's not that bad if you do like a simple Control-Z, but as soon as you start adding changes and adding sync into the mix, then it becomes a problem. I don't often have this problem because I'm usually working on one system and I just wait until the sync is done before I start making changes, but being able to do it straight away for sure. And no built-in publishing support for pages. Technically that could be added. We already have like an export, and sending that export towards a web server is something I could build in a Git pipeline. I partially did that for my Tools on Tech website. Regardless, I think getting that support, getting like that easy publishing will help a lot. I think that's going to be a paid service, a bit like what Obsidian does, and I think it's fair to make it a paid service because there will still be exports, so you still be able to roll your own and make your own free exports, but combine that with an easy way to share a page, which is something that's very common in all the web tools. And I don't think somebody that just uses Logseq and isn't technically inclined would understand why can't I just share this. So these are all fair things. I think he's like glossing over the collaboration part. That's like for me the main thing. If as soon as you put something into like a database and you can share that access to that database, that makes collaboration 10 times easier. And it's something that I would love because now I very often have to open Notion to work together with other people or other web services. And of course, I would love to be able to just share my Logseq stuff straight away. And that will be solved both by the collaboration part and by the publishing support for pages. For example, I make scripts. Of course, I write them in Logseq and then I have to share them with my editor, and she doesn't have Logseq. So I now make screenshots to get like the full formatting that I see, and I do a markdown export and being able to just say like, okay, I'll just publish it and give her the unique URL. That would be much easier and better. And it would be even more like an improvement if she could just Logseq and actually collaborate with me on these things. But for that, I personally would prefer that there would be a web version, because then I can just give a URL without forcing someone to install software, and you will be able to see changes on both ends. So I'll be able to get like feedback and comments like, what do you mean with this? You know, overall huge improvements, but also like a lot of work. Now, I love this heartfelt thing. Yeah, I received a lot of love and support, and then it's unacceptable that Logseq still loses data. This is something that happens. I hate to say it. I love Logseq. I use it day by day. I don't lose a lot of data, but I also don't fully trust. Like, I trust that once I get it in there and my first backup runs in the background, I'll be able to retrieve it. But the sync, it's been improving a lot. When sync got started, like, I lost a lot of these files because there was conflicts happening in between, and that's just unacceptable for note-taking app. Would I worry about it these days? Less so, because I haven't lost any data last time because I'm mostly working on like one system, but that's what's one. And data stability and reliable undo redo is like an extension of that. Stable is something that I've been large proponent for over a while. It's like, you get your bases down first. If Logseq is stable and reliable, that's where we start with, and then from there on you can start building other stuff. So glad that they're mentioning it here. Glad that that's been a forefront, because once that stability is there, all the other stuff, you know, if a feature doesn't work but your data is still there, then, and there's like a hotfix in a week, then most people go like, okay, that's not too bad. But if the system isn't stable and day to day you get annoyed because you can't undo redo or you're losing data, then people go find another tool. So stability is, to me, like, is the core. It's like your car needs to be reliable driving around, and that navigation doesn't work isn't the end of the world. Be performant, fast to open and fast to type. Oh my god, yes please. This is one that really irks me in a way. Definitely when I use something like Obsidian. Obsidian is really fast. People sometimes, definitely people that only use Obsidian, hi Danny, don't know how fast Obsidian really is compared to a lot of other tools. Obsidian is bleeding fast even compared to things like Word, which are high-end tools made by large companies like Microsoft. So getting fast to open and fast to type is, to me, really important. A side note on this one, I really hope that they'll do some background syncing as well in the mobile apps, because this is one of my pet peeves for not using Logseq on the go to make notes, is I have to open Logseq, wait for it to sync, and then I can start writing. And when I write something on the go, I don't have that time. I have like 0.5 seconds. I want to write something down, continue with my day. Regardless, any improvement here is a huge improvement in my day where I use Logseq all the time. Joyful. Oh, I think that's a translation thing, maybe. But still, I agree. Anyone can create any workflow with the new classes and properties. That's for sure. Like, I've been messing around with the database version, and one of the things that I noticed is that this setup, like where I can make class and properties, already makes my mind. I'm definitely going to make a couple of videos once it hits with like how to set up basic project and task management, how to set up basic book libraries. Those will be in general like the same idea of videos, but it's mostly to inspire people on how to build these own things, because having your own structures in a note-taking system really helps in organizing organizing your data, probably the first thing I'll be doing is making like a video database so that I can keep track of what I'm building and releasing. And then we come to the real-time collaboration. So we also developed the database version with real-time collaboration in parallel, as implementing real-time collaboration with offline support is extremely complex. Yes, for sure. That's adding a real big challenge. Real-time collaboration, offline real-time collaboration, is usually technically not possible. You can't collaborate with someone if you can't connect to them. So that's one part of it. And then like Notion's been doing this for years. They have some offline support, but if you change something offline, then it's hard to sync back. Is that the trick that you know? Like real-time collaboration on itself, like take Microsoft, Google Doc. When you're online, you can all change at the same time. And that's because you're all talking like to the same backend and all the changes get sent there. But as soon as you go offline and you make changes and somebody else makes changes, then you come back to the whole merging part problem. So this is a really tough thing to crack. And partially would say that maybe Logseq bit off more than they could chew on that one, because that's a hard thing to get working. But if they do get it working, so not only being able to work with other people together, but being able to open your Logseq on the plane, work on the plane, and then when you get back, have your changes synced with other people that you're working with, it's a game changer. And I think mostly game changer for people that live in countries where the internet is spotty. I live in the Netherlands. We have perfect internet. I mean, I walk out the door, I have connection all the way until I get to the office, and then I complain about like a 1 minute dropout when I'm in the train between two cities. It's absolutely perfect here. But I've been to the US, in Florida, and then there's plenty of holes there, places where there's just not enough people to make sure that there's range. So not everywhere in the world you will have all-time connections. So being able to keep working with your nodes until you get back to an internet connection is hard, but also essential for a lot of people to keep working with it. Considering actually early in the design process, we can minimize the risks of having a change in our implementation later. Basically what this means is they made a decision saying that like, hey, if we're going to build a database version, we need to do this real-time collaboration at the same time. Yes, I agree, because both require extensive changes and they are very dependent on each other, but this also makes it a much more complex beast. This, for me, explains a lot in why this is taking so long. This is really, really, really hard from a development standpoint. Not just because like test setting, this will be easy enough. Like if you're just there with a couple of things and you're testing it with constant connection. But imagine this and you have to send it to like 1 million people that all have like different setups and different internet speeds and different connections. And having it reliable is something where you have to like really carefully. I hope they make it. I'm expecting when they have the first public beta that this will break in beautiful ways. But that's what the beta is for. So that will be fine. But there will be creative things because this is hard. And the first challenge is storage. And then we see this, the new database version should be accessible across multiple platforms, including web, Electron, and mobile. This is a big one. This is also one of the reasons why I can really get behind something like a database version. File systems change. That's like in the web, you don't really have a file system. We fake it. Like a lot of these cloud services, I was working with the Azure storage accounts yesterday, and their objects are just this. They are binary files that are in a database that are a list, and then they fake a file system by changing the name and adding like directory names to it. And that's how you get like a directory structure, but it's not really a file system. Mobile phones have a file system, at least Android has. I'm not sure about iOS because they hide a large set of it. But they do all have like their own database. Electron, which is their local web instead, all have access to some type of database. That's a bit how the world works. I think making this change, making this database thing consistent means that you can have like a nice and easy way of working without being limited to figuring out the file system on every system. Is that good or bad? I think it's good from a stability standpoint, but it might be bad from people that want to have their markdown files on, I don't know, iOS or Android, where it's much harder. I could argue that having like a stable platform on everything and then having like this two-way sync markdown on your desktop means that you will have both worlds, but I can't assume everybody has like a full desktop. But it's a good start. I get why they're adding this database set. To give an example, my web browser, like most web browsers, have like a database built in. It's part of your web browsers. I should be able to show it maybe here. It's like inside your set, like your application, and you can say like your IndexedDB. You can see that there's like databases inside your browser. And this is of course essential because it means that you don't have to worry about, can I store this locally? What it means is that, hey, I can use this database and then send that data somewhere else, but also hopefully remote, meaning that real-time collaboration could be actual real-time. Handling large-scale data, effortlessly supporting up to 50,000 pages. Yes, for sure. Yeah, 50,000 pages isn't even that large a set. If I'm I'm talking about data, and then we're talking about blocks, and I start talking in billions when I'm doing like high end. I think having a database means that this support becomes much easier. I think this is like a lowball number on what a real database can support, because a database doesn't have to look in all these pages. There will be indexes, and it will be working with the pages you are working on. And let's assume we're all human, and we won't be having 50,000 pages open at the same time. We'll have like 10, maybe 20 if you're really fanatic, and then be closing things to keep your mind sane. So that's very workable. I think 50,000 effortlessly is a good thing to start with, but it will be going up from there. They should be safe. They should never be erased by browsers. Yeah, I think he's referring here to things like the demo page, which uses some local remote combination of storing data, and it's not very reliable. You should never use the demo.logseq.com care about your data, or at least double check before you close it if all the data is stored somewhere in text files. But using the database makes it more reliable, but you still should have like a backup. So I'm assuming here that they would have it on two places, like a local database that's written down somewhere that you can access, and something in the browser that's synced. Nah, not sure, but you know, it's still needed. So data should be safe regardless of this last bit. That part's the most important. To facilitate advanced querying, the new database version should offer support for datalog queries. So that's the current advanced queries. We're still using datalog. I like datalog. I like being able to code my queries, but I also think it's way too complex for most average users. So for me, this is less important, but I get that there's a large user base that like built their own queries and that would like to keep using it. And I would also be like annoyed if my queries stop working one day or the other. That said, having a good datalog builder in the front end, which is already something that they're doing, would make it just, you know, work. So datalog queries is nice that they'll keep it in. This part I like. Should provide flexibility by allowing users, plugins, or even other apps to create custom classes and properties. Meaning that when you have something like this, you can also make like a plugin that doesn't necessarily change the functionality, but maybe adds like predefined set of properties and classes. So make like project management plugin that builds like a data structure inside Logseq and means that it automatically becomes like a first class citizen. You see that, for example, in the database demo that I was going through, where I was looking at the tasks. Tasks are part of the standard system, meaning that you can start adding properties to it. I really like that because you can add a property like project to it, or is it active, or is it in waiting, and that way you can build systems around it. And being able to access those systems by plugins means that if a plugin has data that they're using, instead of it looking really weird if the plugin is disabled, it will look in place. So awesome idea. I hope it pans out. Intuitive user interface for class properties should be a delightful experience. It's hugely improved. Last time when I did the database check, this was already way better than it currently is. Can it be even nicer? Sure, but it's very workable right now. Might need some simplification to make it usable for somebody that hasn't been doing databases on the side like me. But overall, I think that they're making huge strides there, and being able to build your own systems. As said, I'm going to make a couple of videos about that, give people an idea of like the power that they'll have once the database version hits. That's the one that we just talked about. Real-time collaboration should work offline. Local first commitment if users have full control over their data. This part to me is why I love Logseq. This is why I spend so much time on it. It's your data. Logseq takes that commitment there, saying that it stays your data and you'll be able to access it. This is for me the main reason why I use Logseq. If it's also your main reason, then definitely let me know, because we love this. Local offline data, and should be end-to-end encryption, privacy first. The real-time collaboration I'm glad with, but I also would like these local files to be end-to-end encrypted. That's my current pet peeve. Like, I can protect everything I have in Logseq, but my text files are still world readable in my system. So anybody that gets to my system when I don't have it locked can just go to the directory, use Notepad, access the files, copy them over. So I really hope that they'll add like local encryption here as well, so that the database is encrypted, meaning that even if somebody would copy my database without my unencryption password, they wouldn't be able to do anything with it. Great. Then we see the project status in roadmap, and they put like 2 Trello links in it. I'll open those in the background. Okay, and let's look at the project status. I like that they're like developing in the open for a large part, mostly in GitHub. But the Trello one is like a summary version. So let's first look at the database one. This, like mentioned, again, here's like the source code. It's not a switch. Both things will be in parallel. And basically these are the steps that they're going through, like ID, which I've seen, the database storage, browser storage, blah, blah, blah. Markdown to database. This is of course important, else you won't be able to import your current Logseq to test the database functions. New user interface components. They're largely done. So I'm definitely going to have a look at the database once this is done. And the new undo redo implementation. Undo redo is a very complex matter. I could dive into that, but that's out of scope for this video. Then of course, database back to Markdown, which is also very important because you want to be able to export it. I want to be able to read my files before I can use it for any type of capacity. And then experiment with two-way sync between DB and Markdown files. Personally, I think that could go later, but I'm glad that they're going to experiment it and see if there are any issues beforehand. Great. Live query improvements and a table and Kanban view. Yes, please. I love to have like a Kanban view in my Logseq. So those are the things that they're still working on. And as you can see, the checklist is like half there, but this is missing like a lot of these small steps, and some of these things are really big and others are really small. So yeah, this won't tell you how far they are along. This just tells them the things that they are planning to work on. Overall, this looks good. Let's look at real-time collaboration. So syncing graphs works offline. They already got that part set up. Share a graph with other people. That's of course amazing. Assets, so that means files and other things that you want to sync is of course very important. I make a lot of screenshots that I put into my Logseq, so those were essential. End-to-end encryption, they'll add that one on top, which seems to be fair because like when you're developing, you want to see all the data, you want to see where things go wrong. And then fine-grained access control, which is of course very important. Once you start sharing with people, you might not want to share every page with everyone. I can imagine like in my case, I want to share like a couple of pages or a couple of sub-pages, but I don't want to share my whole graph with anybody that I want to like share a couple of pages with, because my Logseq is large and it contains a lot of notes that are mine. Then we get to the frequently asked questions. I already discussed the Markdown one, so I won't do that again. Then we get to a question that's on everybody's mind, and that's why is it taking so long? First of all, when we began, there was no existing solution that met our requirements for a persistent database, so we had to build one from scratch. Yeah, not sure on that one. There's a lot of solutions for persistent databases, but I can imagine that when you look at something like the offline real-time collaboration thing, that there might be something that really fits and that you have to change it. Initially explored CRDT for real-time collaboration with offline support, but ultimately found that current solutions didn't meet our needs. Did a quick search on that, conflict-free replication data type. So it means that you set up a system that allows you to sync stuff and then get to like a consistent state afterwards. It works. There's different systems for it, but clearly they didn't want to use what's already there. And I also don't think it's the same. It creates like a sync thing. So I used with databases that had similar systems like these, like double IDs. So there was like a central ID and a client ID, but you have to of course make this peer-to-peer because there is no single source of truth. There is just multiple clients that are talking to each other and have to sort it out basically. Again, that they picked this from scratch. These are two hard problems that they picked from scratch, so that will take time. And I guess that also a lot of these solutions were not fully open source or readable, which is of course a requirement for this setup. Could they have done it? Yes. Would it have saved them time? I'm not sure. Yeah, I would have to dive into the code and do really a deep dive on that. I can't figure that out in this short term. Significant time in refining the user experience for classes and properties. That shows. Yeah, for sure. It's been a huge improvement. I think it had like an improvement there where it's like a much easier setup. And I've seen a couple of the changes while I was messing with the database version where it went from clunky but working to much more usable in time. And that takes time. User experience things are really hard. Could they have stolen some from other tools? Probably. I think that would have saved some time, and I think they probably did. But making your own system and making it consistent, that's tricky. And the mean thing about these kind of things is that the end result doesn't look that complex, because that's the thing with UXs. You spend like 2 months working on the perfect UX, and then the end result's like, oh yeah, this is easy. Like that's the end result. That's the thing after. It's like writing. When you do good writing, you might write 16 pages and then pare it down to 2 and go like, this is awesome. And nobody sees the 14 pages of work that went in there. This is harder than it looks. And I think in large sets that's been accomplished when I look at the current database setup. Our goal is to ensure that the new database version doesn't affect the existing version's functionality. That's the hard one. Because Logseq has been in development for a long time now. There's a lot of features. Everybody has their own favorite feature. So if you make this database version and one of the features on the previous set doesn't work, you're going to get complaints. There's going to be people that say like, hey, I'm missing feature X, Y, Z. I still think they're going to lose things. At some point you have to cut things because maintaining features costs time. At some point you might need to go and say like, okay, we're no longer maintaining it. If somebody wants it, get it out of the core and into a plugin. And I think the reverse should be applied as well. Some things are plugins that everybody installs, get them out of the plugin, make them part of the core experience, but you have to make some changes there. Glad that they're trying this, but this takes a lot of time. I'm not sure. Like, I don't want to speak for other people. Personally, I wouldn't mind a couple of versions getting dropped if that means a huge improvement in the rest. But at the same time, I realized that if it's part of your workflow and you have to change it, not everybody enjoys changing their workflow on a daily basis like me. Is the the database version open source? Of course it is. As you can see, GitHub work in progress database version. I've already shown that in like my video where I went through this branch, and it's one of the things that I love about using an open source product like this. Even if we don't get these in-depth communications, we can still see the code changing. We can still see the work. It's also one of the reasons I made that previous video. And it's the database version free, of course, because all local features will be free to use. They will charge for things that rely on their servers, such as real-time collaboration and probably sharing things to public. And this is of course fair. I think that if the local features are free, that's what you want in an open source product. Anything that requires people to run a server that has costs on it, I expect to pay for, unless I want to get bombarded with ads. And I don't mind. Like, I pay for sync because it's easier, even though I can set up my own git sync, as I mentioned in a previous video, because I like the simplicity. I like the fact that it's encrypted, and I also want to sponsor Logseq because I use it on a daily basis and it makes my life better. Real-time collaborations, definitely that requires like the more higher end cloud services where you have like more speed. So there's costs involved there, and it isn't a lot per person, but it's a lot of money once you start scaling it up to millions. So for sure, I think this is still one of the best sets where you can keep the application free, but still have people that are willing to pay for convenience get like extra features that are centrally managed. One thing I am wondering though is, and that's a discussion that was had previous, this server side, will that be available open source as well? That has a disadvantage, means somebody else could host their own Logseq servers and run the features from there. But at the same time, I really would like this to be open source, because then you can read the code. And then the risk that somebody else might host one, I don't think that's there. Like, if you get the choice between paying $5 to Logseq for sync or paying $5 to some random dude that set up a server for sync, then, you would give it to Logseq because they would be doing the right thing. But I would like to be able to see the code. I think being able to see the source code for what's happening on the servers is more important than somebody else being able to set up one of those servers. Feature plans. Pre-alpha testing with the database version in 2 to 3 months. This is the main question that comes. I should have started the video with this. It's always hard. Like 2-3 months when planning stuff to me is like a ballpark. So mentally, I would double this and just go like, okay, they'll have it in 4 to 6. Yeah, it's not great, but at least you won't be disappointed. Then we're talking pre-alpha in this case, inviting a small group of users to help us improve it. It becomes more stable, expand the testing group to include more users. So the type of users that the small group that they have there are people that are making current contributions, that understand that the alpha will be busted and that they shouldn't put their production data in, because that's a pre-alpha. So testing it with more, and as it becomes stable, they start expanding the testing group. This usually includes the people that are currently donating at the Open Collective one for Logseq, because those are fanatics, and then it will probably expand to people that are like on the Discord or are like active on the Discord, and finally there will probably be a public beta, so a moment that they'll announce, hey, you can start using this, but keep in mind that it's still beta and stuff might break. If you like stability, then don't do it, and then there will still be people that will try it and say like, hey, why did they eat my data? Remember that beta means beta, so if there's a public beta, have backups. Please have backups. So that order I expect. I'm ballparking here a bit based on past experiences, but that's the setup. Using this stable in production is at least half a year out. I wouldn't hold my breath for this to go fast. Definitely looking at the amount of changes that they did, and that the fact that if they lose even a single letter of data here, this is going to go bad. So they're going to be really careful releasing this. Then we also extend invitation to a select group of users and companies to test our real-time collaboration feature once it's ready for feedback. This one's trickier, of course, because this is like a combination of their software where people can just install a version, and real-time collaboration where there will be like a central server that will be updated and might break. Yeah, this is like the same thing as I said above. There will be some companies to test it, but those have to be very technical companies that know that they're testing something that can break. Same part for the users. Yeah, those are like a subset. It's the same thing as here. You get a couple of people that understand how this is, that can provide interesting feedback. You need, of course, people that can explain what went wrong, how it went wrong, so they can simulate it, fix it, and then release a new version, that are okay with like reinstalling a new version almost every day while you're debugging this issue. So I know we're all really looking forward to try this. Same for me. I'll probably be in one of the test groups, but even if I get it as test data, I won't be able to use it day to day yet because it won't be finalized. There will be a tipping point probably just before the public beta where I'm going like, okay, my backups are good enough, but this is definitely like a phase that goes through it. The main thing I think for end users is that as soon as these tests start, you have like a much much better feeling of like where we're at, like how many bugs are there to squash. It becomes very concrete. And let's quickly scroll through some of the replies, and then we start with one from Florian with glad to hear it, same as me. Details, hoping for better markdown compared to common mark. That's new to me, so I'm going to research that after the video to see like what's the differences between regular markdown and common mark, but we'll have a look. Facilitate advanced queries, and Shivrix is very happy with that one for sure, because I've seen some of the amazing queries coming from their way. Both file-based, this makes people excited, and there you see like this nervousness is happening. People are going like, a database going to happen. I definitely think that being able to sync two ways to markdown and having a little bit more time allowing for those things to happen much more reliable is a huge improvement. Let's see. Oh yeah, I just explained the whole select group of users. The users have the chance to apply or participating. Yeah, I think the main thing you can do is join the Discord, provide feedback, and probably be in the donation phase of the open source collective set, because those are usually the first people that are taken from. Put some patches in, anything like that, it will put you in the site. Show that you're technical and send some improvement in if you want to be higher up that list. But do keep in mind that definitely those pre-alphas are not day-to-day use. It's nice to play with, and that's awesome. And you can already do that playing with right now by just going to the database version, installing that if you just want to play with it. The select group of users here should be giving feedback. They should be going through it and providing things like, hey, this is what I see, this is what's happening. This is a good question. I don't know. I haven't seen an answer on this one yet, but will be true for org file support. I would think so, but also like markdown seems to be happening all the time, and I haven't used org support. Currently, I think Logseq writes both, or depending on how you type it. So I'm not sure. We'll wait for an answer on that one. I can't give feedback. I'm going to be a bit blunt here and say like, pick one or the other, either markdown or org files. Having both adds like another set to the mix. Like people that use org is awesome. So I would love to say like have both, but then you would also need like more hands, more people, you add more complexity, and that kind of, I don't want to disappoint anyone on that one, but if I have to be like blunt and look at it from like a enterprise freelancer set where things costs money, then I think org file support at some point will either be dropped, and I think it mostly would be dependent on the user. This is why you have statistics. You want to know how many people are using this, and does it warrant hiring another person to make that support happening. If 40% of your users are using org file support, then definitely keep it in. If it's 5%, then that doesn't mean it's not valid to have one org support, but having that will be hard, or you probably want to move it towards a plugin at some point that is supported by somebody that really wanted org support and wants to spend some of their free time keeping that plugin running. I don't know. We'll wait for the answer there. That seems to be first replies that I got here, and I think this video is already getting very long. So I just wanted to go through like this setup and add my thoughts to it. I hope that was interesting. If you read to this and you still got questions, I'll put a link to the discuss here so that you can actually contribute to the thread that keeps all the conversations going. I mean, I love some comments on my YouTube video, but in this case, if you want answers, then put it in the discuss, because I believe that one gets monitored by at least the Logseq people. They might not respond every day, but I think once in a while they'll go through it and see if they can provide answers. That is for this one. It's pretty short and quick. Remember, you're awesome. Keep it up.